Our top story tonight, a Boise National firefighter died today. Forest officials say that 20-year-old Julianne Young died instantly when a 93-foot snag fell and struck her on the head.
When you visit the great outdoors, it's a wonderful place. Peaceful, quiet. But those of us who work in the forest know that also at times Mother Nature can be deadly. When a tree falls and no one hears it, does it make a sound? That's an old brain teaser we've all had fun with. Unless you're a firefighter. Then when a tree falls,
I was dropping a snag, and I'm sitting there getting into the snag, paying attention to my bar, making sure my cuts were right. The swamp was on the other side of the tree, and neither of us were paying attention. Another snag was about 40 feet behind us. I was making my back cut, had my back to it. Couldn't hear it over the saw. Didn't know it was even there, to tell you the truth. And all of a sudden, right in the middle of the back cut, slam! I heard this big old crashing noise. Turned around, and the tip of the snag landed about probably 10, 15 feet behind us, and we didn't know nothing until it hit the ground. Basically, it was just boom, whoa.
So what's a snag? Well, basically, it's a dead or dying tree that's still standing. And it is the second leading cause of wildland firefighter injuries and fatalities. Now, a snag may be sound or rotten. Usually it has some degree of rotten wood, but not always. And that's what makes it so unpredictable and deadly. A snag's root systems can decay to the point where any vibration, from a gust of wind to a footstep, can bring a tree crashing down. In this program, we'll focus on how to identify and then either avoid or eliminate snags. Information you must have to stay alive. But first, let's look closely at the number one enemy in dealing with snags. And that's you and me and what goes on inside our heads. To illustrate, let's take a short quiz. You're hiking a narrow trail with a river on one side and steep terrain on the other. Along the trail, a large rattler blocks your path, coiled and ready to strike. How do you respond? Ignore it? You know snakes bite other people, but a snake would never bite you. Lunge forward and grab the snake, or simply back off. You're a soldier in enemy territory, engaged in close combat. You've been on patrol for days and you're exhausted. You're in a deeply forested area, knowing the enemy could be anywhere. What do? Stop and get some rest? Place your most exhausted soldier on lookout since he's not able to perform other duties? Realize your platoon sergeant and others are looking out for you, so you don't need to have to concern yourself with safety. Or ensure an alert lookout is posted and stay on guard for yourself. Nothing to it, right? A dangerous situation's easy to spot if you're not in it. So what's the problem? Well, it is simple human instinct to attempt to cope with a dangerous job by rationalizing, ignoring, or becoming complacent about potential harm, especially if the danger seems remote, as in a mop-up activity or a prescribed burn. When we become too tired or too accustomed to the threats around us, we begin to ignore them. But that ignorance is deadly, and it will get you the wrong answer in a multiple-choice quiz when your life's at stake. Another trick your mind can play on you is the immortality complex. When you know that nothing can touch you, you're too young or you're too strong to die, otherwise known as egotism. Now, self-confidence is great, you've got to have it, but overconfidence can cost you your life. A real professional never takes chances with snags. It's not my job. Somebody else will look out for me. These are common thoughts that run through a firefighter's mind. But don't fool yourself. Snag hazard awareness is everyone's job. Each member of the team has to consider their own safety, as well as being responsible for warning other team members about potential danger. Each and every member of the team has to consider themselves as safety officers.
Incident that I was on was in the fire season of 1992, Silver Creek Fire. And it was a pretty scary incident to be on. We had quite a few people, quite a few personnel on the fire that were involved with a fatality. And it affected me in a way I don't think I'll ever forget it. I know I won't. What happened was a snag fell and it hit a firefighter on the line, and her life was taken for no reason, you know. Makes you sit back and wonder why it happened, and you know how you could have changed it, but the end result's still the same. You just wish there was more that you could have done about it.
Egotism, apathy, ignorance. These threaten our safety. First we recognize them, then we can transform them into a solid plan for working around snags. We're at the site of the Silver Creek Fire near Cascade, Idaho. It was here in July of 1992 that a 93-foot snag fell without warning, instantly killing firefighter Julianne Young. She was 20 years old.
She had more friends than we knew, and it was just amazing how many people's lives she touched. Julie could always make them find the humor in it, you know, the positive side, or the, you know, she could turn their day around. And it was amazing how many, I mean, somebody told us they figured there was over 1,500 people at the funeral, and I think that's that's probably, you know, a minute portion of the people that, you know, she was actually truly friends with. I just don't think anybody thought it could have happened, you know, and it was close to home. It wasn't like she was in some faraway place where it was unknown. I mean, she was on West Mountain. It was like stomping grounds, you know. She was in familiar territory. She was with familiar people. It wasn't like even up to that minute they thought that anybody was in any danger. You know, it was just such a crazy fluke thing. It was just, you know, we know now that they're starting to learn more about snags, but yeah, I don't think that any of us ever considered, especially that would ever happen to Julie.
How do we identify snags? What do we watch out for in different types of trees and terrain around the country? There are several common denominators that are present in danger situations that shout, "Watch out," and make identifying a snag hazard a little easier. It is important for you to realize that it is not only the big snags that fall and kill firefighters. Many injuries and deaths have resulted when only a small piece of the tree, like the treetop or branches, has dropped from the sky. And it's not only dead trees that pose a hazard. The limbs and the ladder fuels of a green tree are a serious problem. These limbs are very prone to falling and are appropriately referred to as widowmakers. Another type of widowmaker can be the limbs that break off and get lodged or cradled in the limbs of an adjacent tree, out of sight from your perspective until the slightest breeze kicks up and the limb comes crashing down. Green trees with cat faces from the current or a previous fire, and green trees that have burned through but are still standing, can have the appearance of looking perfectly stable. But remember, they too can fall unexpectedly. Some situations that lead to falling snags are easy to recognize. For example, when the wind picks up, the trees come down. Heavy equipment such as bulldozers and helicopters working in your area, retardant drops, and leaning trees all shout, "Watch out." Mop-up operations create snag hazards. Firefighting crews can significantly weaken snags by cutting through the roots, digging around the tree's base, and in hose lays where hydraulic mining removes the soils around the roots. Once the snag's been identified, a choice must be made: avoid or eliminate. To avoid snag hazards, there are some specific characteristics of some trees that you need to know about. White fir and cottonwoods can have tremendous heart rot and at first glance can appear to be sound, but watch out. They can also hold fire a very long time without any visual signs of burning. Spruce has a shallow root system and grows in highly organic material. When those organic ground fuels burn away, the tree falls very suddenly. Dead cedar trees become very dry fuels, making them more susceptible to aerial spot fires. Consequently, they easily ignite all along the height of the tree and eventually burn through. So while the whole snag may not come down from an obvious fire at the base of the tree, pieces of the tree are prone to fall. The standard operating procedure when you're working around snags is always look up. When you're working on steep terrain, you've got to be aware. A fallen snag can travel hundreds of yards downhill and still nail you. When you're working forested sections, be continuously familiar with the area. When you're digging a fire line, it's just too easy to keep your head down and swing your tool. To be safe, always survey the area you're moving into. And remember, always look up. Eliminating a snag hazard can be accomplished in a variety of ways. But first, your crew boss needs to determine the appropriate course of action.
Our main objective right here is to go through this area and knock down these snags that might eventually hurt somebody that's working on the line.
The decision to actually remove a snag is truly an operational decision that is specific to the situation at hand. Never attempt to cut down a snag unless you've been specifically trained to do so. Anything can happen. It is better to sacrifice acres in the fire than to sacrifice lives. Remember LCES and always refer to your standard fire orders and the situations that shout, "Watch out." Post your best lookouts. It's everyone's responsibility to ensure that communication lines are open and operational. Establish and mark off primary and secondary escape routes and safety zones. Then ensure that everyone knows where they are and how to get to them.
Safety is back on the river.
To leave a tree and report it is not a reflection of poor abilities or incompetence. It may be the right thing to do, and nobody's going to look down on you for it. Also remember, when a snag falls on its own, or when it's brought down by cats, saws, blasting, or burning out, although you may feel you're a safe distance from the hazard, a snag can create a domino effect that topples many trees in its path. Let's briefly review the courses of action that you must be familiar with when dealing with a hazardous situation. Ignorance, apathy, and egotism. Those are your common enemies that threaten your safety. First, you must recognize the threats, then transform them into a solid plan for working around snags. Identify the hazard, avoid the hazard, or eliminate the hazard.
I think that she would say, learn as much as you can and don't be stupid. Play it safe and make the best decisions you can. If I could tell them something, it's just not worth it. I mean, you can't begin to imagine the loss, you know, and you need to think about those things too. You know, you need to think about those people that really need you and love you when you put yourself at risk.
If a tree falls and no one hears it, does it make a sound?